brought the other piece in there that was interesting. She conceded the point that Republicans for years have made about spending on education. The R's have continually said you can't throw big money at education and assume that you get a good. And there was the governor in black and white who basically said, you know what? That's right. $10,000 per pupil, and why are you smiling? Well, and we're getting nothing in, not nothing, but the product's not good.
Here are some hard truths. Just 24% of our fourth graders can read proficiently. The same percentage of eighth graders are proficient in math. I get that this is a national trend, but the reality is we invest more per pupil than most states and achieve bottom 10 results. We spend more and we're getting less, and it's not acceptable.
I have to agree with Representative Tisdale. I think his bill, his legislation, I commend him for introducing that legislation, is good legislation. I would like to see it passed in the State House. I'd like to see it passed in the State Senate and signed by the governor.
But the real fact of the matter is Democrats don't have a plan. Whitmer has put forward a plan, but that does rely on
stress.
Right. But that does rely on Democrats to be able to put forward some legislation in order to further that plan. They haven't really done that yet. The Republican House has already passed its own plan, and the Democratic Senate has done nothing but sort of, poo-poo the fact that this has gone on the way it has. So what's your solution? You can't just say, not this. You have to offer something in return if you're trying to say that this is not the way to go.
After the Republican House plan passed, we asked the House Minority Leader, Ranjit Puri, what are the components, what are the fundraising mechanisms that you and your caucus would support? And he couldn't name any. So Governor Whitmer, while she has sort of a plan, it's more of like the loose outlines of a plan. She wants $1.7 billion from business, but she hasn't said how that money is going to be raised. So she's essentially dragging Senate Democrats who haven't come up with anything comprehensive of their own.
Senate Dems haven't come up with anything comprehensive on their own. Yeah. And House Democratic leadership is just like, oh, well, we're open to negotiations, but won't say what should be involved in those negotiations.
So she's dragging them kicking and screaming to the negotiating table. She said after spring break, she wants to bring the sides together and have them negotiate. But there's no counter proposal to balance against what House Republicans have proposed. But after the Republican House plan passed, we asked the House Minority Leader, Ranjit Puri, what are the components?
But the real fact of the matter is Democrats don't have a plan. Whitmer has put forward a plan, but that does rely on
stress.
Right. But that does rely on Democrats to be able to put forward some legislation in order to further that plan. They haven't really done that yet. The Republican House has already passed its own plan, and the Democratic Senate has done nothing but sort of, poo-poo the fact that this has gone on the way it has. So what's your solution? You can't just say, not this. You have to offer something in return if you're trying to say that this is not the way to go. But the real fact of the matter is Democrats... But the real fact of the matter is Democrats don't have a plan. Whitmer has put forward a plan, but that does rely
Under
on
stress.
Right. But that does rely on Democrats to be able to put forward some legislation in order to further that plan. They haven't really done that yet. The Republican House has already passed its own plan. And the Democratic Senate has done nothing but sort of, poo-poo the fact that this has gone on the way it has. So what's your solution? You can't just say, not this. You have to offer something in return if you're trying to say that this is not the way to go.
After
But the
the
real
Republican
fact of
House
the matter
plan
is
passed,
Democrats
we
don't
asked
have
the
a
House
plan.
Minority Leader Ron
Whitmer
Puri,
has put forward a
what are the
plan, but
components,
that
what are
does
the
rely
fundraising
on
mechanisms that you...
But the real fact of the matter is Democrats don't have a plan. Whitmer has put forward a plan, but that does rely
Under
on
stress.
Right. But that does rely on Democrats to be able to put forward some legislation in order to further that plan. They haven't really done that yet. The Republican House has already passed its own plan. And the Democratic Senate has done nothing but sort of, poo-poo the fact that this has gone on the way it has. So what's your solution? You can't just say, not this. You have to offer something in return if you're trying to say that this is not the way to go.
After the Republican House plan passed, we asked the House Minority Leader Ron Puri, what are the components, what are the fundraising mechanisms that you and your caucus would support? And he couldn't name any. So Governor Whitmer, while she has sort of a plan, it's more of like the loose outlines of a plan. She wants $1.7 billion from business, but she hasn't said how that money is going to be raised. So she's essentially dragging Senate Democrats who haven't come up with anything comprehensive of their own.
Senate Dems haven't come up with anything comprehensive on their own, and House Democratic leadership is just like, oh, well, we're open to negotiations, but won't say what should be involved in those
So
negotiations.
she's dragging them kicking and screaming to the negotiating table. She said after spring break, she wants to bring the sides together and have them negotiate. But there's no counter proposal to balance against what House Republicans have proposed.
But I thought the other piece in there that was interesting, she conceded the point that Republicans for years have made about spending on education. The R's have continually said you can't throw big money at education and assume that you get a good, and there was the governor in black and white who basically said, you know what, that's right, $10,000 per pupil, and why are you smiling? And we're getting nothing in, not nothing, but the product's not good.
Here are some hard truths. Just 24% of our fourth graders can read proficiently. The same percentage of eighth graders are proficient in math. I get that this is a national trend, but the reality is we invest more per pupil.
But the real fact of the matter is Democrats don't have a plan. Whitmer has put forward a plan, but that does rely
Under
on
stress.
Right. But that does rely on Democrats to be able to put forward some legislation in order to further that plan. They haven't really done that yet. The Republican House has already passed its own plan. And the Democratic Senate has done nothing but sort of, poo-poo the fact that this has gone on the way it has. So what's your solution? You can't just say, not this. You have to offer something in return if you're trying to say that this is not the way to go.
After the Republican House plan passed, we asked the House Minority Leader Ron Puri, what are the components, what are the fundraising mechanisms that you and your caucus would support? And he couldn't name any. So Governor Whitmer, while she has sort of a plan, it's more of like the loose outlines of a plan. She wants $1.7 billion from business, but she hasn't said how that money is going to be raised. So she's essentially dragging Senate Democrats who haven't come up with anything comprehensive of their own.
Senate Dems haven't come up with anything comprehensive on their own, and House Democratic leadership is just like, oh, well, we're open to negotiations, but won't say what should be involved in those
So
negotiations.
she's dragging them kicking and screaming to the negotiating table. She said after spring break, she wants to bring the sides together and have them negotiate. But there's no counter proposal to balance against what House Republicans have proposed.
But I thought the other piece in there that was interesting, she conceded the point that Republicans for years have made about spending on education. The R's have continually said you can't throw big money at education and assume that you get a good, and there was the governor in black and white who basically said, you know what, that's right, $10,000 per pupil, and why are you smiling?
Well,
and we're getting nothing in, not nothing, but the product's not good.
Here are some hard truths. Just 24% of our fourth graders can read proficiently. The same percentage of eighth graders are proficient in math. I get that this is a national trend, but the reality is we invest more per pupil than most states and achieve bottom 10 results. We spend more and we're getting less, and it's not acceptable.
I have to agree with Representative Tisdale.
But the real fact of the matter is Democrats don't have a plan. Whitmer has put forward a plan, but that does rely on
stress.
Right. But that does rely on Democrats to be able to put forward some legislation in order to further that plan. They haven't really done that yet. The Republican House has already passed its own plan, and the Democratic Senate has done nothing but sort of, poo-poo the fact that this has gone on the way it has. So what's your solution? You can't just say, not this. You have to offer something in return if you're trying to say that this is not the way to go.
After the Republican House plan passed, we asked the House Minority Leader, Ranjiv Puri, what are the components, what are the fundraising mechanisms that you and your caucus would support? And he couldn't name any. So Governor Whitmer, while she has sort of a plan, it's more of like the loose outlines of a plan. She wants $1.7 billion from business, but she hasn't said how that money is going to be raised. So she's essentially dragging Senate Democrats who haven't come up with anything comprehensive of their own.
Senate Dems haven't come up with anything comprehensive on their own, and House Democratic leadership is just like, oh, well, we're open to negotiations, but won't say what should be involved in those
So
negotiations.
she's dragging them kicking and screaming to the negotiating table. She said after spring break, she wants to bring the sides together and have them negotiate. But there's no counter proposal to balance against what House Republicans have proposed.
But I thought the other piece in there that was interesting, she conceded the point that Republicans for years have made about spending on education. The R's have continually said you can't throw big money at education and assume that you get a good, and there was the governor in black and white who basically said, you know what, that's right, $10,000 per pupil, and why are you smiling? And we're getting nothing in, not nothing, but the product's not good.
Here are some hard truths. Just 24% of our fourth graders can read proficiently. The same percentage of eighth graders are proficient in math. I get that this is a national trend, but the reality is we invest more per pupil than most states and achieve bottom 10 results. We spend more and we're getting less, and it's not acceptable.
I have to agree with Representative Tisdale. I think his bill, his legislation, I commend him for introducing that legislation, is good legislation. I would like to see it passed in the State House. I'd like to see it passed in the State Senate and signed by the governor.
But the real fact of the matter is Democrats don't have a plan. Whitmer has put forward a plan, but that does rely on
stress.
Right. But that does rely on Democrats to be able to put forward some legislation in order to further that plan. They haven't really done that yet. The Republican House has already passed its own plan, and the Democratic Senate has done nothing but sort of, poo-poo the fact that this has gone on the way it has. So what's your solution? You can't just say, not this. You have to offer something in return if you're trying to say that this is not the way to go.
After the Republican House plan passed, we asked the House Minority Leader, Ranjiv Puri, what are the components, what are the fundraising mechanisms that you and your caucus would support? And he couldn't name any. So Governor Whitmer, while she has sort of a plan, it's more of like the loose outlines of a plan. She wants $1.7 billion from business, but she hasn't said how that money is going to be raised. So she's essentially dragging Senate Democrats who haven't come up with anything comprehensive of their own.
Senate Democrats haven't come up with anything comprehensive on their own, and House Democratic leadership is just like, oh, well, we're open to negotiations, but won't say what should be involved in those
So
negotiations.
she's dragging them kicking and screaming to the negotiating table. She said after spring break, she wants to bring the sides together and have them negotiate. But there's no counter proposal to balance against what House Republicans have proposed.
But I thought the other piece in there that was interesting, she conceded the point that Republicans for years have made about spending on education. The R's have continually said you can't throw big money at education and assume that you get a good, and there was the governor in black and white who basically said, you know what, that's right, $10,000 per pupil, and why are you smiling? And we're getting nothing in, not nothing, but the product's not good.
Here are some hard truths. Just 24% of our fourth graders can read proficiently. The same percentage of eighth graders are proficient in math. I get that this is a national trend, but the reality is we invest more per pupil than most states and achieve bottom 10 results. We spend more and we're getting less, and it's not acceptable.
I have to agree with Representative Tisdale. I think his bill, his legislation, I commend him for introducing that legislation, is good legislation. I would like to see it passed in the State House. I'd like to see it passed in the State Senate and signed by the governor.
But the real fact of the matter is Democrats don't have a plan. Whitmer has put forward a plan, but that does rely on
stress.
Right. But that does rely on Democrats to be able to put forward some legislation in order to further that plan. They haven't really done that yet. The Republican House has already passed its own plan, and the Democratic Senate has done nothing but sort of, poo-poo the fact that this has gone on the way it has. So what's your solution? You can't just say, not this. You have to offer something in return if you're trying to say that this is not the way to go.
After the Republican House plan passed, we asked the House Minority Leader, Ranjiv Puri, what are the components, what are the fundraising mechanisms that you and your caucus would support? And he couldn't name any. So Governor Whitmer, while she has sort of a plan, it's more of like the loose outlines of a plan. She wants $1.7 billion from business, but she hasn't said how that money is going to be raised. So she's essentially dragging Senate Democrats who haven't come up with anything comprehensive of their own.
Senate Democrats haven't come up with anything comprehensive on their own, and House Democratic leadership is just like, oh, well, we're open to negotiations, but won't say what should be involved in those
So
negotiations.
she's dragging them kicking and screaming to the negotiating table. She said after spring break, she wants to bring the sides together and have them negotiate. But there's no counter proposal to balance against what House Republicans have proposed.
But I thought the other piece in there that was interesting, she conceded the point that Republicans for years have made about spending on education. The R's have continually said you can't throw big money at education and assume that you get a good, and there was the governor in black and white who basically said, you know what, that's right, $10,000 per pupil, and why are you smiling? And we're getting nothing in, not nothing, but the product's not good.
Here are some hard truths. Just 24% of our fourth graders can read proficiently. The same percentage of eighth graders are proficient in math. I get that this is a national trend, but the reality is we invest more per pupil than most states and achieve bottom 10 results. We spend more and we're getting less, and it's not acceptable.
I have to agree with Representative Tisdale. I think his bill, his legislation, I commend him for introducing that legislation, is good legislation. I would like to see it passed in the State House. I'd like to see it passed in the State Senate and signed by the governor.
But the real fact of the matter is Democrats don't have a plan. Whitmer has put forward a plan, but that does rely on
stress.
Right. But that does rely on Democrats to be able to put forward some legislation in order to further that plan. They haven't really done that yet. The Republican House has already passed its own plan, and the Democratic Senate has done nothing but sort of, poo-poo the fact that this has gone on the way it has. So what's your solution? You can't just say, not this. You have to offer something in return if you're trying to say that this is not the way to go.
After the Republican House plan passed, we asked the House Minority Leader, Ranjiv Puri, what are the components, what are the fundraising mechanisms that you and your caucus would support? And he couldn't name any. So Governor Whitmer, while she has sort of a plan, it's more of like the loose outlines of a plan. She wants $1.7 billion from business, but she hasn't said how that money is going to be raised. So she's essentially dragging Senate Democrats who haven't come up with anything comprehensive of their own.
Senate Democrats haven't come up with anything comprehensive on their own, and House Democratic leadership is just like, oh, well, we're open to negotiations, but won't say what should be involved in those
So
negotiations.
she's dragging them kicking and screaming to the negotiating table. She said after spring break, she wants to bring the sides together and have them negotiate. But there's no
wonderful.
counter proposal to balance against what House Republicans have proposed.
But I thought the other piece in there that was interesting, she conceded the point that Republicans for years have made about spending on education. The R's have continually said you can't throw big money at education and assume that you get a good, and there was the governor in black and white who basically said, you know what, that's right, $10,000 per pupil, and why are you smiling? And we're getting nothing not nothing, but the product's not good.
Here are some hard truths. Just 24% of our fourth graders can read proficiently. The same percentage of eighth graders are proficient in math. I get that this is a national trend, but the reality is we invest more per pupil than most states and achieve bottom 10 results. We spend more and we're getting less, and it's not acceptable.
I have to agree with Representative Tisdale. I think his bill, his legislation, I commend him for introducing that legislation, is good legislation. I would like to see it passed in the State House. I'd like to see it passed in the State Senate and signed by the governor.
But the real fact of the matter is Democrats don't have a plan. Whitmer has put forward a plan, but that does rely
Under
on
stress.
Right. But that does rely on Democrats to be able to put forward some legislation in order to further that plan. They haven't really done that yet. The Republican House has already passed its own plan, and the Democratic Senate has done nothing but sort of, poo-poo the fact that this has gone on the way it has. So what's your solution? You can't just say, not this. You have to offer something in return if you're trying to say that this is not the way to go.
After the Republican House plan passed, we asked the House Minority Leader Ranjit Puri, what are the components, what are the fundraising mechanisms that you and your caucus would support? And he couldn't name any. So Governor Whitmer, while she has sort of a plan, it's more of like the loose outlines of a plan. She wants $1.7 billion from business, but she hasn't said how that money is going to be raised. So she's essentially dragging Senate Democrats who haven't come up with anything comprehensive of their own.
Senate Dems haven't come up with anything comprehensive on their own, and House Democratic leadership is just like, oh, well, we're open to negotiations, but won't.
But what the Democrats and Briggs try to say that the Republican budget, which by the way, the House Republicans, we passed an education budget that's been sitting in the Senate chamber for many, many months and weeks. And this is what it does. It actually, look at this. This is from the analysis, the nonpartisan analysis. It maintains the current year appropriation for at-risk funding. So Democrats try to say that the House budget, oh, they couldn't hear me when I did that? Well, I don't need that. I'll just not do it again. All right. Anyway, now I have two mics. How does that look on the video? Is that one? I don't know. Hopefully it looks good. So anyway, it says that that we got at-risk and special education. That's false. I mean, we actually maintain the at-risk funding, and when they talk about helping the school districts that are the lower income school districts, the way that that's done is through the at-risk funding. What the at-risk funding does is it puts more money into the more it puts more money into the school districts that are not well off financially, because what we see is that we need to put more money and more investment in those lower income districts in order to help those schools get to where they need to on education. That's why the House budget actually keeps the at-risk funding, which is a very false statement by the Democrats. And then we actually increase special education funding by $127 million in the House budget. Now, I heard Winnie Brink say that we cut it, but you look, according to these documents, we actually increase it $127 million. So we're making big investments in the House budget on education in the school districts that need it the most. And I looked through this list, and a lot of these are in Democrat districts, places like Dearborn, where making big investments in the lower income districts, they benefit the most. And we really want to help lift some of those schools up so that all kids are educated, not just the ones in the wealthy districts. And then with this extra funding for special education, you know, we all know special education, you know, you need more resources in order to help there, because sometimes it's a lot harder to educate people in that area. And that's why we make that investment there. So what Democrats are doing is they're taking our budget, which eliminates a lot of the regulations and empowers local districts, and then they're making very large generalizations and they're lying. That's why I think it's important to show you we fund at-risk in the House budget, and we fund special education, and we actually increase it by $127 million. So I think that's important. Did you have the next slide? I know you guys hate the slides, but it's important you read this since the Democrats lie. Yeah, and this is very interesting. So this is another thing that the Democrats lie about. So this came out from the Michigan Department of Education on August 19th, 2025, okay? And it points out the State House budget would place in a single funding category several essential items, including but not limited to universal school breakfast and lunch, funding for English learners, per pupil funding for mental health and school safety, early literacy coaches, career and technical education programs, and assessments to be allocated on a per pupil basis. So this came out from the Michigan Department of Education, which is controlled by Democrats. So I just want to point out that when the media runs stories, scaring people into believing that these school lunches are not available, I would encourage them to look at this guidance from the Michigan Department of Education, which clearly says the State House budget funds school breakfast and lunch. Okay? And by the way, under the House budget, we could do even more. We could do dinner, they could do snacks, they can fund any meals they want, because what our budget does is it puts it in a place where the schools have the flexibility to use it on any of these things or other things. And so the Democrats are just straight lying with their fear-mongering and rhetoric, and I know that our friends in the Capitol Press Corps are smarter than to fall for those partisan tricks. But we thought we'd put the quote up here from the Michigan Department of Education. So what's the next one? Oh, look at this. This is my favorite one. So I've talked about how important it is to make investments in schools and how important it is to invest in our K through 12 system. This is very important to notice. If you look at the governor's recommendation, the Senate's recommendation, and the House's recommendation, and Travers, you see this, he's a fair journalist. The biggest one, the House education budget. It's actually bigger than the Senate education budget and the governor's education budget. So the House proposes to spend the most on education, but yet you hear radical left leaders like Winnie Brinks say that we have to make a choice between roads and education. That's not true. We fund education more than the Democrats do, more than the governor does, but yet we have a plan to put $3.1 billion into roads. So you do not have to pick between education and roads. You can do education and roads. You just have to cut out all the pork projects for the lobbyists and all the corporate giveaways, something that the Democrats are afraid or do not want to do. Excuse me. So hopefully the media will report that the House education budget is bigger. We actually spend more money on education than's ever been spent before, and more than the Democrats do. And so if you're one of these schools, or if you're a parent, the good news is everyone, whether it's the governor, the House Republicans, or the Senate, we're all talking about putting more money into education than they have this year. So there's no reason why any cuts would have to be made to education. But importantly, the House Republicans propose spending the most on education. That's why a lot of people like our plan and support our plan, because it spends more on education than the Democrats' plan. But we give them the flexibility to trust the local school districts instead of giving all the money to the lobbyists and pork projects that are donors to a lot of Democrat politicians. You want to go to the next one? Okay, so I wanted to talk about this. So, we're talking about this enormous growth in state government under Gretchen Whitmer. And so I just wanted to show you a few of these departments so you get an idea of how much these departments have grown since Governor Whitmer became governor. And so when politicians like Winnie Brinks and Kevin Hertel say that there's no waste, fraud, and abuse in this state government budget, this is why the public doesn't believe them. Look at this. So the first column on these slides is going to be the last budget under Republican Governor Rick Snyder. And then the second column is the current budget under the Democrat trifecta. Now, you know that the voters were so outraged by what this Democrat trifecta did that they replaced the House Democrats with the House Republicans, and we were the only chamber in the country that flipped from Democrat to Republican in the last election, and this is why, because of all the waste, fraud, and abuse that Democrats have put in this budget. So I just want to give you, we probably got 8 examples. I could show you every single department, but I know you guys have other stories to cover. But you look at the Attorney General, it's a 22% increase in that department since Dana Nessel became Attorney General. And the interesting thing about this budget is there's one line item pretty much for 90% of the budget called operations. So when, the ultimate Lansing insider, Sarah Anthony, says that she's looking at every line in the budget, I looked at every line in the budget. I said, it's pretty easy if a whole department is basically one line item called operations. So what we need to do is really break this apart and look very carefully at a department like this that is increased by 22% with one line item called operations. We really need to look carefully at that budget and say, where is the Attorney General getting all of this money to lose lawsuits against her political opponents and to drag her political opponents into years and years and years of litigation with no end in sight, and to sue President Trump's administration without the backing of the state of Michigan on these crazy political quests? She'll lose all of those too. What, the next one? Look at this, technology, management, and budget. Now, if there was a black hole in state government, it would be this department. This is where all the IT projects live. These billions and billions of dollars of IT projects. Now, you guys remember the MySACWAS? This was the, it was in the families area of DHHS where, when we were dealing with all of the child services issues, and they built this billions and billions of dollars on MySACWAS, and it didn't work, and the caseworkers told us, and we had a lot of House Oversight Committee meetings on this, and they scrap it and they say, we're going to start over and we're going to build a whole new software system, 5 or 6 years later, and they're going to, every one of these costs at least $1 billion, by the way. It's amazing. Look at this, 36% in the DTMB budget since the Democrats took control of government since Rick Snyder left. And so we're looking very carefully at this budget for all the waste, fraud, and abuse, and also to rein in some of these out-of-control IT systems. Where's the next one? You guys have the next one? Okay, agriculture. So this is increased 38%, this budget, under the Democrat trifecta. This is another great example of a budget just rampant with grant programs that contain waste, fraud, and abuse. You got the next one? Oh, the Civil Rights Department. Look at this. 80% increase in the Civil Rights Department since Rick Snyder was in office under the Democrat trifecta. And so you look at a department like this that is increased 80%. One thing these departments do, and this is a great example, is they create a bunch of fake employees. They call them FTEs. So essentially, you ask for all of these positions that you can't fill, and then you work project it. And so what these departments are doing is they're squirreling away billions of dollars that they get allocated in their budgets and they don't spend, and they get to keep these. We estimate this is over $6 billion in state government that these departments are not spending, that they're being allocated, and they're just holding on to in their accounts. One of the worst offenders would be this department, but there are many departments, whether it's the state police or the corrections departments, those are big offenders. There are a lot of them that do this. But on this one, I know there's hundreds of unfilled government positions. And essentially what Democrats did when they came into power is they greatly increased this budget. They hired hundreds and hundreds of new workers to investigate businesses and investigate employers for all kinds of accusations. And it's out of control, and there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse there. Do you want to go to the next one? Look at this. Labor and economic opportunity, 92% increase under the Democrats. So if you look when Governor Snyder was there, it's about $1.2 billion. Under the Democrat trifecta in their last budget, it's $2.4 billion. This is a 92% increase in the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. And so you look at that and you say, when Winnie Brinks and Kevin Hertel say there is no waste, fraud, and abuse in a department that increased by 92%, the public don't believe them. And so we're looking very carefully at this. This is where a lot of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, MEDC programs are. This is where all of the pork barrel projects for the Democrats are. And so this is an area that you're going to see in our upcoming budgets. There's going to be a lot of change to this department. This is one of the departments that has the most waste, fraud, and abuse in state government, is the LEO budget. So we're going to make major changes to that budget. We're going to end a lot of the corporate giveaways, including the SOAR program. We're going to eliminate most of the pork barrel spending in state government, and we're going to invest that money into higher priorities like education and roads. You want to go to the next one? Oh yeah, look at this. Is this the last one? Yeah, we saved this one for last. Eagle. Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. This has increased 107% since Governor Snyder left office, okay? Democrats have turned this from a $501 million budget into an over $1 billion budget with an increase of 107%, okay? Now, these are the same Democrats that are telling you that there's no way to fix the roads without gutting Medicaid or taking it out of schools. They failed to talk about a 107% increase in this department. And we're not getting results from this department. All we're hearing are complaints from people that are dealing with permitting problems and all kinds of regulatory problems that's actually stifling job creation in Michigan. And that's what happens when you double a budget like this for a department that's out of control and is really looking to promote anti-job policies and anti-job regulations. Now, when Governor Whitmer got up at her State of the State and asked us to work on regulatory reform and permitting reform, I said, exactly, we'll do that, absolutely. And you see the Rules Committee under Bill G. Schuette putting together a report. In that report, we actually agree with Governor Whitmer on about 70% of her regulation changes, her regulatory reform ideas and licensing reform ideas. If you look at the Lara report, there's a Lara report. Bill Schuette agrees with about 70% of that report. It's kind of interesting, when the governor was in the Oval Office with me, she said, we agree about 70% of the time. And then you look at this this Lara report, it's kind of interesting. It's like she knew what was coming. But with this Lara report and our report, and then the additional permitting and regulatory reform ideas that the Rules Committee and Bill Schuette have, we're not going to need this extra money for the Eagle Department. So I think when you start totaling up these departments, what you really see is that we had the money all along to fix our roads. Remember when Governor Whitmer campaigned and said, I will fix the roads? She had the money all along, but instead of investing that money in roads, the money was invested to grow government and grow departments, and then to spend money on pork spending for politicians, and to give billions and billions of dollars away to companies like GM and Ford and Goshen, and those projects have created no jobs. That's what happened with our state budget. And so when we put forward a budget that shows how you can eliminate $3 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse and replace it with roads funding that will be permanent roads funding that will ensure that our local roads are fixed once and for all, it shouldn't be such a surprise to all you people. It can be done, but we have to set priorities. And our priorities are not to grow government departments. They're to make investments in roads and education and public safety. That was the last slide? Okay, so I'll just say real quick, I'm grateful to Mayor Duggan, who had his big press announcement earlier this week, mentioned me in a very positive way and talked about how we partnered with him to pass legislation out of the House that would fund public safety. And he mentioned, because of Senate Democrats, there's a pot of money sitting there that could be fighting gun violence in these cities with the most violent crime now, but Senate Democrats are blocking that. And he applauded me for working with him on it. I'll just point out, that doesn't help Republican districts. That helps Democrat districts. And in particular, but I'll say, that's okay, because if we're trying to lower the violent crime rates, that helps everybody in Michigan. What Democrats in the Senate are doing is they're trying to steer the money to their own districts, okay? We're saying, look, it doesn't matter whose districts it is. Let's just take on the violent crime where it exists, and let's eliminate the violent crime, and let's lower our crime rates, and that helps everybody in Michigan. And that's why Mayor Duggan and myself and the Republicans are working so well together. I think the Democrats in the Senate would be wise to look at some of the things he's doing and embrace him, because they're on the verge of losing a good portion of their own party because he sounds a lot more rational than they do. I mean, look at that press conference yesterday. Look at the contrast You have Mayor Duggan putting out solutions. And then you have the other Democrats out there just attacking me and complaining about me. What is it that Gretchen Whitmer and Mike Duggan have figured out about working with me that the radical left Democrat leaders like Winnie Brinks and Ranjiv Puri don't get? And what you're seeing here really is the moderate Democrat Party versus this Mandabi in New York wing of the Democrat Party, whose leaders are Ranjiv Puri, who is a protege of Abraham Ayash. We all know that. And Winnie Brinks. These people are leading the radical left. And so this fissure in the Democrat Party is what's causing this problem as we're trying to get a budget done. I hope all of the Democrats unify around Governor Whitmer and let her lead them, because if they do, we will get a budget done very quickly. We've known each other, we know how to make deals, and we've done it in the past, and we'll do it again before September 30th. But the Democrats need to empower her. And I would say, I've reached out to Winnie Brinks. The last time that we talked was because I called her. But I don't think Winnie Brinks wants to get into the negotiation room with me because she knows that I'll get a better deal. And so I think it's going to take Gretchen Whitmer to drag her into that room so we can get a deal. And I hope that we can get a deal. But Winnie Brinks does not want to negotiate at the negotiating table with me. She doesn't know the budget as well as I do. And she doesn't think she'll get a good deal. So they try to put anyone else in there except for her. But ultimately, I hope Governor Whitmer drags her into the room and the three of us can sit down and make a deal. And if she empowers Governor Whitmer, I think we'll get a deal done very fast. So I'll turn it over to the press if you have any questions. It's okay if you don't.
Yes.
Is there an argument to be made that legislators hearing from their constituents that the government is broken, but the only way to fix it is by breaking the government by shutting it down?
I don't understand that argument.
If you're hearing from constituents that the government is broken, do you think that the solution to it being broken is to shut it down?
No. Yeah, Beth.
Some school districts have reported that they've been laying people off because of the uncertainty they're facing with no high budget. Do you want to respond to that at all? Some of the mental health counselors who they deal with their funding some years, so they're
Yeah. So one of the main things that I'm fighting for in this state budget is to restore funding for school safety and mental health. And when the Democrat trifecta was there, they slashed that 92%. And right before the election, they tried to fix that and put a little bit in, but it's still way down. So the mental health and school safety funding is way down because of the last Democrat budget. One of the main things that we're trying to achieve in our budget, and if you looked at it, what we did was we put what they call boilerplate. We put rule in place. You must fund school safety and mental health with this money. So when I pointed out how the House Republican budget is bigger than any of the Democrat budgets, there is one requirement: you must fully fund school safety and mental health. I would just direct them to the guidance from the Michigan Department of Education, which clearly says that a lot of these things are in that budget. And then all parties are advocating for more funding for education. We're just funding for the most. So I would say any school district that's laying people off when everybody's talking about increased funding is probably doing it for performance reasons.
Necessarily getting that increased funding right now because we haven't budget. So what you're saying is performative. You're saying it's performative that these schools are laying books off and canceling programs like free breakfast lunches. They don't know where that funding's going to come from. I just want to make sure.
Yeah. Well, I think if you look at the guidance from the State Department of Education, which explains our budget, all parties are proposing funding school lunches. You know what I mean? So all of these things are being proposed by all the parties, except maybe the school safety and mental health funding, because Democrats have tried to cut that in the past. So I would just say that if I was a school superintendent and I was watching this and I saw that all parties want to increase my funding, I wouldn't be making all of these crazy decisions, because I'd see that all parties are trying to fund me more, and I would assume they'll work it out.
So the there's like a school line.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you look at the budgets, you guys can put them back on the screen. All three budgets increase spending for schools, just the House Republicans increase it the most. And then if you look at the guidance from the Department of Education, they explain that we fund a lot of those things in our budget. It's just done in a way that is a little different than the establishment is used to. You know what I mean? So, but that's why they put out the guidance saying all parties do this. What Democrats are doing is they're relying on very minor technical things in order to try to stir up a lot of controversy, but everyone is proposing funding those things.
If I could change the subject, apologies. I think I asked this the other day, but just to reaffirm, you mentioned waste, fraud, and abuse.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
I'm curious if you can give us an example of specifically, I heard fraud thrown around a lot this last week. It's a pretty big accusation to make against a state organization. I mean, what, if anything, are you finding? What is the ratio of waste, fraud, and abuse? You could break that down.
Yeah, and I really want to compliment Ann Bolin and Matt Maddock, particularly Matt Maddock, who's been having lobbyists come to him for months into his office, telling him where a lot of this waste, fraud, and abuse are. And he's finding a lot of it. And I'll just point out, you know, I would use the Arts Council as an example of waste. I mean, you look at the Arts Council, they're funding barbershop quartets, they're funding glass blowing, puppet art. Apparently there's 2 different puppet art organizations in Detroit. They're funding both of them. When I started looking at some of these grants, I realized they're worse than the pork projects that the politicians put in there. You know, the Detroit News writes a lot of stories about the pork projects the politicians put in the budget. These grant programs, when you let Whitmer administration officials decide what to do with this money, it's actually more scandalous than what the politicians are doing in some cases. And that really surprised me. And I think the Arts Council is one of those. But there's many grant programs all over government. So I think you look at that. You know, I'll just use the most obvious example. When you look at the Attorney General's office, that's a very clear abuse. When you see an office dragging its political opponents into years and years of litigation with no end in sight, you know, you look at entering lawsuits on behalf of the office when the state of Michigan is not even backing them on those lawsuits over and over and over. That is a clear example of abuse. And I think when you look at a lot of the things in the MEDC, just as an example, we've seen very clear examples of fraud. And so we've put some very important things in place under HEAT, the Hall Ethics, Accountability, and Transparency Plan. And one of those things is requiring budget disclosure. That's one of the reasons there's such a delay in this budget, is Senate Democrats like Sarah Anthony and Kevin Hertel do not want budget transparency. They do not want us to show you what is in the budget in all of this pork spending until after we vote. And I don't think that's right. That's why what the House did is we put into place months ago required disclosures. If a politician is trying to shove money into this budget, they need to explain what it is, what is the public purpose, who is the beneficiary. They must certify and we'll verify it's not going to a for-profit company. The organization exists, there's a public benefit, and they should put their name on it and they should be proud of it. And then on top of that, we required a public hearing. So every earmark that we're considering in our budget must have gotten a public hearing. And so we did that. And my hope is that's going to allow a lot of time for scrutiny so we can root out some of the fraud in these earmark programs. And I think that's what we're trying to do. And I think a proposal like what the Democrats have, particularly Anthony and Kevin Hertel, is if you don't disclose to the public what you're trying to shove into the budget until after the vote, you're going to continue to have the fraud.
Yeah.
Well, now that you have these examples of waste and fraud, how long is it going to take you to adopt the budget and get it over to the Senate so that you can negotiate it since you're, 6 weeks past the July 1st deadline?
Yeah, and you're going to See it very soon. So we'll see. It's going to be very soon, but you're going to like it when you see it because it's finally taking on the waste, fraud, and abuse, and it's setting priorities in state government like fixing our roads, funding education, and supporting public safety. Yeah.
With ranked choice voting thing going through the House yesterday, what do you think the likelihood is that that will even get past the Senate or even go to voting in the Senate?
Well, I think that'd be a great opportunity. I mean, we talk about all of the great House bills that are sitting in the Senate. You know, this would be a great opportunity. Now that the impasse is over, and you all saw I moved one of their bills yesterday, this Senate bill that we moved and got 100 votes on. The impasse is over. Why not take up ranked choice voting in the Senate, put it up for a vote? You know, I've seen the polling on this. People in Michigan strongly oppose ranked choice voting. It's a very confusing process, and essentially it's designed so that the people the public want to win lose. So the person that wins the election loses the election because of a very complicated formula in how the voting is done. It's a way for the person the majority of people want to win to lose. So I would hope Democrats in the Senate would move that legislation. I think now that the impasse is over, that'd be a great issue for them to take up next. Yeah.
The last major shutdown we had only lasted a few hours. So
Yeah.
your plan is to at least get your budget done, delivered by 30, kind of pushing right up to that deadline shutdown. How long do you think it will take to get to a consensus budget after that? Do you presume that will take longer than a couple hours if it does shut down?
Yeah. Well, since we're putting together the perfect budget, it really should only take a couple of hours, honestly. We send it to them, they adopt it, we'll present it to the governor, something that Joe Tate doesn't know how to do. We'll present it to the governor, she could sign it. I mean, so in the scenario you lay out, we could send the budget and we would only need a couple hours at that point. But I think that we'll try to give them a little more days than that to work through this. And like I said, I think once they empower their leader, Governor Whitmer, somebody that I have a proven track record of doing things and getting deals with, it'll take less than 2 weeks to get a deal. That's what I think. And
It seems optimistic, though, with the kind of consternation that exists between you and the Senate Democrats.
well, if they empower their leader, Governor Whitmer, I mean, this is a battle going on between two factions in the Democrat Party. The radical left, like this New York mayor candidate, Mondami, and someone like Gretchen Whitmer, who's trying to lead the Democrat Party in a direction of working with President Trump. And you're seeing that play out in this chaos on the Democrat side in these budgets. And so if the Democrats can unify and empower their leader, Governor Whitmer, we'll get a deal done in about 2 weeks, probably less, because I think when I show this to her, she will see a lot of this waste, fraud, and abuse. And will help us eliminate it. And then I think we share a common goal of getting the roads fixed. And Governor Whitmer has said that there's not a budget deal without a roads plan, and I agree with her on that. I'd like to see the Senate Democrats' roads plan. They could put that out. How are they going to fix the roads? Because if they don't have a plan, then hopefully they empower Governor Whitmer, and we'll get a deal done very fast. And, you know, it won't be easy, but we'll do it very quickly.
The governor said no to one-on-one negotiations between just you and her, that it needs to be all of the quadrant leaders at the table.
The quadrant, I don't know. We have the triangle. You know, the triangle, they're calling it, which is Speaker Matt Hall, which me, Winnie Brinks, and Governor Gretchen Whitmer, the triangle. You know, I could see the triangle meeting, but again, in order to get the triangle to meet, I really think we're going to need Gretchen Whitmer to drag Winnie Brinks to that conversation because Winnie Brinks doesn't want to negotiate with me because she knows that I'll win that negotiation. So really, and you know, if it's 2-on-1, I mean, I think if it's 2-on-1, it won't be 2-on-1 the way you think it'll be. Because there's a lot of alignment between the governor and myself, particularly on fixing the roads, which I think is really important. We must fix our roads. It's something Governor Whitmer has not done in 6 years. And, you know, Governor Whitmer said, I'm the only legislative leader she's worked with that has the guts and the brains to put a road plan on the table, this is when he brings opportunity to show her that there's another leader with the guts and the brains. But we're not seeing that right now. Yeah, go ahead.
See an updated budget from the Senate based on newer numbers in order to negotiate? Is that still something that you stand by, or are you just hoping to kind of adopt the House budget since it's the perfect budget? As
Right, right. That's a great question. So, the Democrats get up and they don't talk about what they want to do. They just attack me and they make it very personal. And that's been going on ever since I was Speaker for 8 days, and they sued me and they sued the House. And you guys all remember they tried to make it personal and serve me in front of the cameras. That failed, and they lost their lawsuit, and a lot of it was dismissed. Now we're still fighting in courts, but they're going to lose. They made it very personal. They sued the House. That's the first time in Michigan's history that the Senate has sued the House. That's really put this on a trajectory of difficulty. I don't think they should have sued the House. See, I'm smarter than them, and so I look at it and say, okay, if I need the Senate to get bills done, would I sue them? No, I wouldn't do that, right? But I'm more effective. So, and by the way, how do we know I'm more effective? I won the MERS Award for most effective Republican in the largest margin they've ever seen. I also won, the Newsmaker of the Year from Gongwer last year. I won the MERS Political Figure of the Year last year. I won almost every association award you can win this year or last year for my work. The Economic Development Person of the Year twice. So when I talk about this stuff, I know what I'm talking about. And then I had the highest approval rating of any politician, including Governor Whitmer, in the recent polling Epic MRA did. And we know they're the most reputable polling firm in the state. So just to go through, I know what I'm talking about. And in order to be effective, you shouldn't be suing the people that you're trying to get to pass your bills. You know what I mean? Now, just to kind of move forward on this, I think it'd be really smart for the Senate Democrats to propose a budget based on the real numbers. When we put a budget forward, our budget is going to be based on the real numbers. We're not going to overspend by billions and billions of dollars. That's what makes this negotiation complicated, is their budget is billions of dollars more than what we have to spend. That's what I mean when I say they have no priorities. So how do you negotiate with someone with no priorities? It's very hard, right? That's why they're saying, let's just do it the same as last year and just add 4% to everything. Well, the public wants us to get value for their dollars, and they expect us to eliminate the waste, fraud, and abuse. And they want us to direct it to more important priorities like roads, education, and public safety, and that's what the House Republican budget does. So I agree with you. They'd be very smart to revise their budget and make it based on the numbers we actually have. Yeah, to the Dean. Act 51? No. I think that what you see going on from Democrats, okay, so what we've done in the road negotiations is we've found a landing spot where the counties, the cities, the townships are all in alignment, Republican and Democrat. When we had a recent House hearing in Kevin Hertel's district in Macomb County, you heard Mark Hackle, the Democrat county executive, his team testified in support of the House Republican roads plan. We've seen Warren Evans in Wayne County support the House Republican roads plan. I've even heard your mayor here in Lansing, Andy Shore, say positive things about the roads plan. So when you can get the counties, the cities, and the townships, Republican and Democrat officials behind your roads plan, why would you throw in a curveball at the 11th hour to totally, they call that a poison pill, Tim. You know what they do? They come in and they say something and it blows the whole thing up. We're trying to do policy that unifies people, not policy that divides people. And what unifies people is that every road, no matter where it is, needs more funding, and that's what our plan does.
So you don't believe the formula is tilted towards outstate Michigan Republican districts and therefore disadvantaging Democrats in urban areas? You don't believe it?
Well, I've met with a lot of the local mayors and the county executives, and what they're seeing is that the House Republican roads plan doubles or triples their funding. And so no matter where you live, if you're seeing that kind of benefit, that's why they're saying let's support the House roads plan. And I understand that. So no matter what, they need more money. And so what we're trying to do, and the reason that we haven't gotten roads done under Governor Whitmer, is because they're focusing on these very divisive subjects. What I did is put a plan together that unifies everyone, Republican and Democrat, and we passed it through the House with bipartisan support. So I think rather than trying to complicate it and blow it up by pitting communities against each other, we can unify behind a plan that Democrat and Republican elected officials support all over Michigan, including in Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties. Yeah, Beth.
What are your thoughts on the governor's draft leadership plan during these budget negotiations, and how is she going to bring us into the negotiations?
Oh, when is she going to Japan?
I believe early September.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know about that. How long is she there, do you know?
We've heard a
Couple
couple of weeks.
weeks, okay. Well, you know, I will say that the governor has taken a few trips during the budget conversations, and you know, I found her to be very available and engaged to talk to me when she's on those trips. So, you know, and one, you know, I saw the governor's office put out a report. They're like, and by the way, if you look at their report, do you notice? It says, I've talked to her 3 times, and these 2 leaders have talked to her 2 times. So even if you use that measurement, I've talked to her more than each of the Democrats have. But I've actually talked to her a lot more than those 3 times. Those are just the 3 times that are scheduled meetings. But I've probably talked to her over, I mean, probably 20 times during that time. Just so you get an idea. There's a lot of conversations going on in a lot of areas we agree. And if she's in Japan, I would expect that her and I will talk a lot while she's there too. That's one thing that I say very positive about her is no matter where she is, her and I talk very frequently, and we're making a lot of progress. I can't speak to how that impacts Winnie Brinks. But yeah, that'll be very interesting to see how that impacts Winnie Brinks. Yeah.
You keep saying, you know, now in earlier press conferences that you're going to come up with a perfect budget. But how's a budget that's not done on deadline, and the fact that it's not done, that school districts are sending out layoff notices, and there's uncertainty whether you think that there ought to be or not. How can that be described in advance as a perfect budget when it's not done?
Yeah, well, just to be clear, the House education budget has been sitting in the Senate chamber for some time, for many weeks and months. And I've kind of laid out that budget to you and why it's a good budget. And it spends more than any Democrat budget. It also empowers local school districts to have the flexibility to decide how to spend their money. And I give the example, it's like what the Democrats want to do is like, here's $100, you must spend it on transportation. And if the local district says, well, I can do the same transportation for $80, they lose the other $20. So by giving the local districts the flexibility, you know, that will empower them to spend their money further and on more items than just the regulated and mandated items by the Democrats.
Well, but even a lot of school districts say that, well, putting it out that way is far from a perfect budget. And since half of it isn't done, it's not just about who's to blame for that, is you still don't have a budget done on time. There are consequences for that. And you keep saying a perfect budget when it seems like that ship has sailed.
Yeah. Well, and I'll point out, you know, that's one reason why today Jamie Thompson has put forward a joint resolution requiring that if the politicians don't have their budget done by a statutory deadline, that their pay will be withheld or they'll lose their pay. That's one reason Jamie Thompson's put that forward, and why we're voting on that today is because if the Democrats in the Senate, if they had a provision like that in place, so if there was a provision saying that if the politicians lose their pay if they don't get a budget done by the statutory deadline, we would have got a deal done. I would have got a deal done by July 1. The problem was, without a policy like that in place, and I give Mike Duggan credit for coming up with the idea, but without a policy like that in place, the Democrats in the Senate walked away. They don't want to do a deal because there's no urgency. And Democrats would rather blame the Republicans than compromise on a budget. And they would actually rather shut the government down than compromise on a deal. And that's, that's been clear going back to before the election, when Mallory McMorrow started saying there's going to be a government shutdown if you elect a Republican House. And that drumbeat has continued and continued and continued. They sued us. They never intended to do a budget on time. They just wanted to blame us because they're trying to win the next election. What the Democrats don't realize is they're not pushing people their way. They're pushing people in the Democrat Party, Mike Duggan's way, and they're actually hurting themselves. And so I think they'd be wise to work with me and Mayor Duggan and do a policy to stop the politicians from getting paid if they don't get a budget done on time. And this policy, if enacted by the legislature and then put on the ballot before the voters in the next election in 26, if that type of a policy is in place, we'll get a budget done very fast. And I'm going to need that because I'm going to be here another 4 years as Speaker after this. I don't want to go through any more of these budget crises where the politicians are not getting serious. I mean, you look at this, they want to spend days and days negotiating about the size of the table and what room we're in and what chairs there are. It wasn't until the very end where they would even talk about education. We would have a lot more seriousness and a lot more urgency out of Democrats if they had skin in the game and their paycheck was on the line. And that's why we're moving Jamie Thompson's joint resolution today. Yeah, Beth.
Would it be accurate to say, like, those budgets that you put on the screen and the different departments, budgets increase, are those what you guys are targeting for cuts?
Some of them, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are others. I just didn't want to show you every single budget because I thought that, Tim was giving me a lot of crap for an hour-and-a-half press conference. I mean, if I showed you every one, I figure we'd probably be longer than that. Yeah.
Momentary change of subject. Could you share some of your thoughts on a bill from House Democrats that would require the governor's permission to deploy the military in Michigan?
What would it do?
Require the governor's permission for military to be deployed in Michigan.
Oh, I oppose that. That bill will never move in the Michigan House. One of the things that President Trump has been doing is he's been restoring law and order across this country. And you look at the headline in MLive recently where the Detroit mayor credited President Trump for helping fight violent crime and lower violent crime rates in Detroit. If President Trump finds local governments and local politicians that are refusing to enforce public safety. I mean, imagine if Winnie Brinks became mayor of one of these cities and then refused to do something like the Public Safety Trust Fund. You look at a politician like Winnie Brinks who's just sitting on $100 million that could go to violence prevention right now and cleaning up gun violence across our state. When you start having very radical people like that in office, I don't think we should handcuff the president from sending in the National Guard if needed to restore law and order in these very violent cities. I mean, I was in Washington, D.C. recently, and I saw firsthand, they've got a big problem with violent crime, and so I think it's a good thing President Trump is helping them clean it up, and so for that reason, we would never entertain this bill.
And a follow-up related to the budget. You said that the budget will be done soon. We'll see it very soon.
Right.
Talk about division amongst the Senate Democrats. Can you talk about the next couple of weeks, what the plan is going to be to kind of break through some of these barriers to actually get it done now?
Yeah. Well, I pointed out how many of these departments have grown by 30%, 40%, even 106%. Overall, the state budget has grown 43% since Whitmer took office. And Whitmer had the money the whole time to fix the roads, but instead it was spent on growing government departments, giving the money to the big corporations like Ford, GM, and Goshen, and poor projects for politicians to buy their votes for these bills. But fortunately, we still have the money to fix our roads without raising taxes. We've passed a House Roads Plan that shows how we do it. We've passed an education budget that's been sitting in the Senate for weeks that actually wants to spend more money on education than the Democrats. So there's a lot of really good things going on. So I think that what we could do is we could get the Senate Democrats to put forward a roads plan, and then we can negotiate roads and education. I think that would be really good. We should give our kids the assurance that their schools are going to be funded, their parents, the teachers, the superintendents. There's no reason we can't do that now because there's an education plan from the House and an education plan from the Senate. Also, the House has a roads plan. So we can start with education and roads, and then we can work through the rest of the departments once we've put our final touches on identifying all of the waste, fraud, and abuse that's rampant in this government. And by the way, once we've identified it and eliminated it, it'll be easier in the future budgets because there'll be a lot less of it. Yeah. Welcome back, Mr. Eggert. Well, I think what Governor Whitmer has said is there's no budget until there's without a roads plan. So we're not going to have a final budget without a roads plan. So I don't anticipate that there would be a budget without a roads plan. So we're going to have a budget done by September 30th and a roads plan. Schools hopefully are going to be funded earlier than that. That's what we're going to try to do. So, you know, I mean, I think that you're going to see some of our budgets before there's a roads deal. Do you know what I'm saying? So you're going to see them, but I think that you know, the final deal will all happen at the same time because Governor Whitmer and I have both said there's not a budget without a roads plan. And the Democrats should listen to her. They really should. I mean, she's much more popular than the legislative Democrats. They'd be smart to listen to her. Yeah. Well, you know, one of the things that I really like about our chair, Ann Bolin, first of all, she knows the budget better than anybody, and she knows all the numbers, and that's one reason why we're going to win the negotiations is because for those budgets that she's negotiating with Sarah Anthony, the ultimate Lansing insider, all Sarah Anthony cares about is protecting the lobbyists in Lansing. And Ann Bolin has a much superior knowledge of the budgets. And so that's one reason that we're going to win the budget negotiations. And that's why Sarah Anthony and Winnie Brinks don't want to get in the room with Ann Bolin and I, because we understand this stuff in and out much better than they do. And when you have superior knowledge of the budget, you're going to get a better deal. That's why they're trying to do this thing through staff, you know, because they think that evens the playing field, or through lower level people. But, you know, I'd like to be in the room with Winnie Brinks and Governor Whitmer. I think Governor Whitmer is going to have to drag Winnie Brinks into the room. And I think we could get a budget done if Winnie Brinks empowers Gretchen Whitmer. Now, with Ann Bolin, you know, Ann, as we know, you guys know Ann, she's a very optimistic person, and that's one thing I really like about her. And you'd have to be optimistic if you're hitting your head against a wall over and over and over with Sarah Anthony, who does not want to disclose earmarks until after the vote, and is trying to protect every single lobbyist and Lansing insider up here. So I would be beating my head against the wall too, dealing with somebody like that. But because Ann Bolin is such an optimist, it works, okay? Now, as part of being an optimist, you know, she had a little bit of an optimistic view of the budget timeline, and I give her credit for that. I'm just saying that it's more likely that it's going to happen after Labor Day. So. All right, well, thank you. Yeah.
That was the disconnect, that she's just more optimistic than you are?
She's a very optimistic person, and that's why I picked somebody. You know, when you're picking these people and you meet these subcommittee chairs, I mean, you start looking at people like Mike Mueller, how passionate he is about the state police. You say, you picked the right person for this job. Matt Maddock is the vice chair of appropriations and everything he's been doing to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. Ken Borton running the DNR. Nancy Jenkins Arno running LEO. You start looking at some of these people, even Greg Van Werkum on Medicaid. We picked the right people for all of these positions, and they all have the passion, and they understand their budgets so well. Well, we did that with Ann Bolin too. You got to have a little contrast, and her contrast is she's a very optimistic person, and that's why we work so well together. All right. Well, we'll see you guys on the House floor. Enjoy.